So what? Does the law teach faith in Jesus Christ? You bet your bottom dollar it does. You bet your bottom dollar it does. Yes, it taught faith in Jesus. So Paul is not pitting Jesus against the law. That's a misunderstanding and an abuse and a misuse of God's holy word. You go back to the drawing board on that, because that's not what Paul intended. Hey, how's it going, everyone? My name is Spencer Smith, and thanks for tuning back into my channel. Today, I wanted to make a short little video talking about the aim and the purpose of the law of God. What was the law of the covenant all about? Why was it given, and what was its purpose and aim and scope, especially for the old covenant? Now, this is an important issue because today we have many people who are quite confused about the law and its function and how it was actually distorted in Jesus's day and the apostles' day, and how it was actually far different from what its original intent was actually for. And I hope to show what the law's intent was all about. And I brought up a few passages here, and I wanted to address this because I've been receiving some comments and different people addressing me on this issue of theonomy. What does theonomy mean? Theos nomos, essentially all it means is God's law. Now, theonomists typically believe that God's law should be the standard for ethics. And what is ethics but morality? So when I say theonomy and when I say theonomist, what I mean is a person who believes that God's word, his written word from, doesn't matter what we can generally glean from in the Old Testament is, and in the New, of course, is the standard for ethics, for morality. So that's what a theonomist believes. Theos nomos, God's law, is a standard for ethics. So I retain that. I believe that wholeheartedly. But, I catch a little bit of heat because people want to say, oh, well, you want to live under Mount Sinai. I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that Jesus said the law of God taught love for God and love for neighbor, and I want to implement that. That's what I want in my life. That's what I want to do to others. And that's where I truly believe the law of God really teaches that. But, what's disheartening is that I find a lot of believers, especially among the preterists, who don't seem to believe that. They kind of sound like dispensationalists at some sense. In some sense, they sound like that. Don't you understand, Spencer? We're under the dispensation of grace. We're not under the dispensation of law. That's dispensationalism, and yet a bunch of preterists are out there spewing that nonsense. And I kind of want to address it. So, without further ado, let's get into this study. What was the aim and the purpose of the law? Why was it given? What was its intent? So, if you follow Paul all the way through, you have to understand Paul in his entirety and who his opponents were, to understand his attitude towards the law. Sometimes Paul can give a negative attitude, if you will, towards the law of God, what seems to be negative. But I can assure you, Paul does not believe the law is evil of any sort. He says in Romans 7 that the law is holy, righteous, and the commandment is holy, righteous, and good. And he says, I delight after the law in the inward man. After the man who is redeemed by Christ, I delight after the law, he says. And he says, we know that the law is spiritual in Romans 7. In 1 Timothy 1:8, he says, we know that the law is good, but here's the catch: if one uses it lawfully. That's the whole issue. Paul was attacking people who did not use the law lawfully. So let's talk about how Paul viewed the law and the lawful use of the law. This is Paul's whole point. So let's look at it. Romans 9 and verse 30. This is what Paul says. What shall we say then? That Gentiles who did not pursue righteousness laid hold of righteousness, even the righteousness which is by faith, or literally out of faith. But Israel, pursuing a law of righteousness, did not attain that law. Why? This is the $64,000 question. Why is it that the Gentiles who did not have the law of God, did not have the written word, did not have the covenant, why is it that they attained righteousness? But Israel, who had the law, who had the worship of God, who had the covenant, did not attain to the righteous. Why? Why did they not attain righteousness? This is what Paul says. Verse 32, because they did not pursue it by faith. And I love this. But as though it were by works. Paul's saying as if. It's essentially saying as if the law taught works salvation. As if the law actually taught that you can actually justify yourself and save yourself by external obedience. That's not what the law taught. If you actually read the law, what does the law begin? In Exodus 19, when he says, God says, I carried you out on eagle's wings. Now let me ask you, some preterists who are out there, what? God carries Israel out of the land of Egypt in the house of slavery. What? To put them under a yoke of slavery? What you are calling the law? Are you serious? You know how ridiculous that sounds? No. The reason why Israel did not attain righteousness and they were actually becoming Satan or a synagogue of Satan is because they skewed the law. They made the law external. They made the law an outward show. But that's not what the law was all about. Everyone knew that the law was supposed to be internalized. Everyone knew that the law that was never used to be something to be gain righteousness with God. It was all by faith. It was all by faith, and that's why they did not attain the righteousness of the law. But the Gentiles attained it. Why? Because by faith. And Israel thought, hey, we can attain that righteousness by works. And Paul says, yeah, right, as if the law taught righteousness by works. That's Paul's enemies. That's why Paul at times seems to have a negative attitude towards the law because, well, he's attacking people. Well, Acts 15, verse 1. What did the Judaizers say? No one can be saved unless they are circumcised, what? According to the customs of Moses. They thought an external show in the flesh is something that justified them. Now, it's a shame that the verse actually breaks here because Paul's thought continues on. And he says, just as it is written, they stumbled over this stumbling stone. But just as written, behold, I am laying in Zion a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense, and the one who believes upon him will not be put to shame. So we know who this cornerstone is, this one who is the stone, a rock of offense. We know who that is. It's Jesus Christ. Peter picks up on this. All the New Testament authors quote this, and they speak of Jesus Christ, who is the chief cornerstones, whom the builders, Israel, rejected. What is Paul saying? They stumbled over this. They stumbled over faith in Jesus Christ, who is the cornerstone. They were so caught up and so busy trying to justify themselves by the law of righteousness, but not realizing that the law was actually about something greater. And it's a shame, again, that it divides here because Paul's thought continues on. He says, brothers, my heart's desire and my prayer for God for them, Israel, is for their salvation. For I testify about them that they have a zeal for God, but not according to knowledge. For not knowing about the righteousness of God and seeking to establish their own. Do you see that misuse of the law? Do you see how Paul sometimes can be negative towards the law? Now you understand why. Because the Judaizers and those in Israel, were seeking to establish their own righteousness. For not knowing about the righteousness of God and seeking to establish their own, they did not subject themselves to the righteousness of God. What is Paul saying? They did not subject themselves to the law of righteousness. Why? This is Paul's answer. Why did they not subject themselves to the law of righteousness? The righteousness of God. Why? And this English translation is quite botched here. It makes people, they strip this out of context all the times and they say, here you go. We're not under it. Here we go. We're not under the law anymore. This law, this evil, burdensome, ugly law, it's just terrible. No, this is what Paul says. Why did they not subject themselves to the righteousness of God? Why? Well, here you have it. Verse 4. For Christ is the what? People think, end means termination. But no, telos here, telos does not mean end as in termination. It does not mean that. End means goal here. In the old Septuagint, Ecclesiastes 12, what does Solomon say? The end of the matter is this: fear God and keep his commandments. Solomon isn't saying the end, here's the termination. No. He's saying the goal, the purpose, the aim of life is this: fear God, keep his commandments. That makes far more sense. But in the English, it kind of gets lost. But what is Paul saying? Christ is the telos gar nomon. What does that mean? Jesus is the goal, the aim, the purpose of the law. Jesus is the purpose, the aim of the law for righteousness to everyone who believes. So many think that Jesus, or Paul attempts to pit Jesus against the law, but if you understand it properly, that's exactly the opposite of what Paul is trying to do here. Paul doesn't say Jesus is the termination of the law. No, Paul is saying Jesus is the goal, the aim, the purpose, the focus of the law. So why did Israel not attain righteousness? Why? Because they did not believe in Jesus Christ. But the Gentiles, they believed, and they attained the righteousness of the law. You see that? One last verse here that I think is very important here. John 5, verse 45. Jesus says this: do not think that I will accuse you to the Father. The one who accuses you, and he's speaking to the Jews here, the apostates, the one who accuses you is Moses, the law, in whom you have set your hope. For if you believed Moses, if you believed the law, you would believe me. For he wrote about me. But if you do not believe his writings, how will you believe my words? Profound. That's what Paul means when he says Christ is the end in the English, the telos, the goal, the purpose, the aim of the law. Jesus, faith in Jesus, faith in the Messiah, faith in the cornerstone, righteousness in Jesus Christ is what the law taught. Deal with that. You got to wrestle with Jesus here. Do not think that I will accuse you to the Father, or the one who accuses you is Moses, the law. The law accuses you. The law accuses you. Why? You've set your hope in the law, Jesus says. But if you believed in the law of Moses, you would believe in me. You see, Jesus says if you believed in the law, if you really extolled in the law, you really believed the law, and you made your boast in the law, you would believe in Jesus Christ. You would believe faith in Jesus Christ. You would believe in him. Because the law was all about Jesus. The law was all about Jesus. And that's what Jesus says in Luke 24, the road to Emmaus. He takes them through the Old Testament all throughout. And he shows them from Moses to the Psalms, Isaiah, the prophets, all of them. It was all about him. So what? Does the law teach faith in Jesus Christ? You bet your bottom dollar it does. You bet your bottom dollar it does. Yes, it taught faith in Jesus. So Paul is not pitting Jesus against the law. That's a misunderstanding and an abuse and a misuse of God's holy word. You go back to the drawing board on that, because that's not what Paul intended. Paul was attacking a false view that sought to disconnect Jesus or righteousness by faith in Jesus apart from the law. What happens when you do that? What happens when you take Jesus, whom the law is all about? What happens when you take Jesus apart from the law? Moses accuses you. God condemns you. That's what he says. Moses accuses you because you do not believe me. So now we can understand why Paul says, the law condemns. Yeah, you bet your bottom dollar it condemns. If you don't believe in Jesus Christ, you bet it's going to condemn you. Because Jesus is the aim, the goal, the focus, the purpose of the law. Figured I'd make that video. But muse on this. Muse on John 5. I mean, golly, it's so beautiful. I mean, we don't have to place these false antitheses anymore. We don't have to say the law was, burdensome and the law was so evil and the law was so bad. And we don't have to place those false antitheses. We don't have to say that, because Jesus says the law taught love for God and love for neighbor. Paul says the law taught the law's aim, its focus, its purpose, its meaning, its goal, its scope, its whole meaning was Jesus. We don't have to place these false antitheses anymore. The whole Bible is about Jesus Christ. So, of course, I can go into deeper detail about that. We can muse on that, but isn't it ironic that Psalm 119, the longest chapter in the Bible, extols what? The law of God. And how wonderful it is, right? David, oh, how I loveth thy law. It is my meditation all the day. Psalm 119:97. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful reality. We know, Paul says in 1 Timothy 1:8, he takes it for granted. We know that the law is good if a man uses it lawfully. And what's the lawful use of the law? Well, believing in Jesus. That's the lawful use. That's the purpose. That's the telos. Christ is the end, the telos, the goal, the aim, the purpose of the law. Hope you guys like this video. And if you do, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And if you disagree, that's okay. But at least we can get thinking about this kind of stuff. And I get pretty passionate, but that's the preacher side in me. I have to get this out because I truly honor and love the Lord. I truly love his word, and I just want to be consistent. I'm trying to be consistent, but I catch people who are very weird in the comment section. I mean, golly, maybe I should take the comments away. But anyways, God bless you all. Subscribe, and we'll see you on the next time.